Well, good evening from the News Radio 1120 AM and 93.7 FM KPNW studios. I am Gunter, also known as Bill London. I do the wake-up call 6 a.m. to 9 Monday through Fridays on KPNW, streaming worldwide at kpnw.com. All right, I bet there's a question you have. I bet you're thinking, I don't understand anything that has to do with my insurance policies. Oh, who could I ask? I wish there was like an ask insurance kind of thing. Wow, you've come to the right place, because you know what? Sean Sutherland is that guy. His company is actually called Ask Insurance, and he sponsors the Crazy Oregon News. So if you have questions about your account, your health insurance, your Medicare, your Medicaid, all of that, well, you need to actually contact Sean, because Sean even named his company Ask Insurance. So he's begging for people to call him up with convoluted questions about Byzantine insurance policies. So why don't you do that? All right, good. Now, let's get to the crazy news. And I want to say, I was just in the bathroom a while ago, and I noticed that I have Ramblin' Rod hair. Now, all I need is a vest with random buttons all over it. Some of you will know what that is. And probably you're thinking, well, it's better than Hobo Kelly. Yes, indeed it is. All right. Well, Oregon Governor Tina Cotek has created now the Behavioral Health Talent Council. And it's supposed to address the shortage of behavioral health workers. Now, a state report found that 32 of 36 counties have fewer than one mental health care provider per 1,000 residents. And meanwhile, the state's residents report we're number 4. Yes, Oregon has the 4th highest rate of mental illness. That kind of really explains pretty much all of this news. That said, who did the governor put in charge of this new Behavioral Health Talent Council? Wait for it. Yes, her wife, First Lady Amy Cotek Wilson. She is going to be chairing the 22-member council, and it's supposed to address increased diversity, worker shortage, high turnover rates, and improved recruitment for providers in the Oregon Health Plan. And they're supposed to have a plan by next January. And actually, a lot of people would be cheering this particular move, except you've got the fact that the First Lady and her role in her wife's office actually prompted quite a bit of scrutiny last year after 3 of the governor's top staffers quit their jobs after protesting that Cotek Wilson's growing role was interfering with just about everyone and anything. Now, the state's ethics agency has said that Cotek Wilson is allowed to volunteer in the governor's office and receive some staffing and equipment to help her out in that role as long as she doesn't benefit financially. At this point, she is not getting paid, but it's a bad look again. Oregon Governor Tina Cotek has done something which surprised everybody. She actually directed her staff to approve the extradition of a woman accused of embezzling several $100,000 from the Eugene Weekly newspaper, and in the process, in that embezzlement, almost tanking the entire thing. Now, as we've told you before, Cotek originally said, no, I'm not going to pay to extradite her. The suspect is Elisha Young, and she was the paper's former business manager, and she was eventually arrested in Whitehall, Ohio, and jailed after a nationwide warrant for her arrest was sent out. And then, when she was caught, the Lane County District Attorney went to the governor's office and said, okay, we're ready to extradite. And the governor said, no, not paying for it. So, now she's saying she will extradite. Well, there's a little problem here. After she refused extradition, they released Elisha Young. Nobody knows where she is. It should be noted, after this whole thing blew up with the Eugene Weekly, she sort of disappeared, only to be found quite a while later in Ohio. So it's not like this person may not just decide, Ohio is just not the place to be right now. And you have something else that goes along with it. And that is that now the investigation literally starts from ground zero again, trying to find this woman. So the governor was worried about saving a couple of $1,000s, sticking this woman on an airplane and flying her back to Oregon to put her in jail. Now you have law enforcement in Oregon and also Ohio that are spending money, once again, trying to find and arrest this particular individual. Now, according to the governor, she changed her mind after, quote, reflecting on the impact of the broader community by the theft committed against the Eugene Weekly. However, as has been Cotek's history as governor, her consideration usually changes after she's roundly criticized, and that happened in part by Lane County's district attorney, Chris Perosa, and, by the citizens at large that were irritated, in particular those that actually donated their own money to keep the Eugene Weekly afloat after all their money had been allegedly taken by Alicia Young. So, again, because of her waffling, now everybody's spending more money to find this particular individual. The nationwide warrant, fortunately, remains in place, meaning that police across the country could continue to look for her. Here in Oregon, Young actually faces 5 counts of felony theft for stealing over $300,000 from the Eugene Weekly between July of 2021 and December of 2023. By the way, according to Lane County DA Chris Perosa, this case is actually the second refusal by Governor Tina Cotek to extradite a suspect back to Oregon to be prosecuted. So a consultant conducted a management review of the Oregon Department of Transportation recommended that the department, quote, utilize more consultants for large projects and create a new committee to oversee those projects, along with a lot of other changes to boost accountability in the agency. This new review found that ODOT has issues pretty much up and down its organizational structure, from cost estimating to contract administration, risk management, decision-making for major projects, which is kind of what ODOT is supposed to know how to do. Now, Republican Senator Bruce Starr of Dundee actually requested $50,000 to do this review, and legislative leaders actually tapped Starr to lead the creation of some sort of accountability measure or measures for a major transportation package for ODOT during the current legislative session. Now, this was after it was embarrassingly discovered that ODOT and legislators failed to deliver on multiple accountability measures after they passed a massive 2017 funding bill. Legislators are now working on a bill to give another big fat package of billions to ODOT for major projects, many which were supposed to be paid with the money that they were given in 2017, but who's counting? So a bill hasn't been publicly shared, but recent proposals include creating a cap and trade program for carbon emissions, again, as a funding source. The review was made by 2 engineering firms, Atkins, Realis, and Horrocks, and their report said ODOT's antiquated funding model, which was at the center of, a $1.1 billion budgeting error, hindered planning abilities and undermined legislative confidence. Let's just say that it undermined everybody's confidence. ODOT auditors who conducted a budget development review after that $1.1 billion error was discovered found that the staff didn't even understand how the funding model involved in the error even functioned. These are people that are handling billions, and that's like billions, of your taxpayer dollars, and they don't even know how to do basic accounting. The reviewers also said designating funding prior to doing adequate scoping or readiness assessments were completed have led to massive cost increases when large projects were changed in scope. And an audit released in late December found that all of the named projects in the 2017 bill increased in price and had added scope. And that's for the ones that they actually started. And here we are again, actually refunding the same projects because of, let's just say it straight out, incompetence at the Oregon Department of Transportation. Well, after patients and physicians accused healthcare behemoths like United Healthcare of driving physicians away in pursuit of profits after acquiring clinics in cities like Eugene and also in Corvallis, the Oregon House passed Senate Bill 951, and for the first time, or well, one of the first times, this was pretty much a bipartisan affair. The bill's goal is to tame corporate influence in healthcare, and it now heads to the governor for her signature. So Senate Bill 951 imposes some of the country's toughest rules on corporate ownership of doctors' offices and medical clinics. State law already required that licensed physicians hold at least 51% ownership in medical practices. The thing is that corporations like United Healthcare get around the rule by creating what are called management service organizations, which are supposed to manage the clinics behind the scenes. But what the MSOs have been doing is installing a physician as a figurehead, and they retain all of the authority over staffing, scheduling, and yes, your medical decisions. And while the bill doesn't specifically outlaw MSOs, it does limit what they can actually do and how care is delivered. The bill also outlaws restrictive contracts that bind doctors to corporate clinics with non-compete and non-disclosure clauses. Now, all of these issues allegedly occurred in Eugene and Springfield when Optum, which is a subsidiary of United Healthcare, took over the Oregon Medical Group in 2024. And if you recall, we reported here that many of the patients in Eugene and Springfield got nasty grams saying, sorry to tell you this, but we're no longer able to treat you. And that was due to physicians leaving. Well, because of the non-competes, they couldn't stay in the area. That created a problem. It left a lot of people, estimates in the thousands, without primary care. It impacted access to preventative care. People couldn't get referred to specialists, and they couldn't even get refills on their prescriptions. So while the bill passed on a mostly bipartisan vote, there were still a few opponents against the bill, and their main argument against it was they said, well, it'll eliminate outside investment and reduce access to medical care in rural and underserved communities. So, U.S. Senator Ron Wyden over the Memorial weekend was in Jackson County, and he held a town hall in Medford. And for the most part, it was railing about the new funding bill that passed the House and is now in the Senate. And he said that he will fight President Trump and the Republican spending bill now that it's in the Senate. So he made claims that the bill cuts federal funding for Medicaid, imposes new work requirements, which he says will force people to lose their Medicaid, and is angry that the bill prevents Medicaid money from going to Planned Parenthood. All right, so let's look at what the bill does and how it's going to affect Oregon. Now, the bill would require adults who are childless between the ages of 19 to 64 who qualify for Medicaid coverage to show proof that they work, they attend school, or they even do community services at least 80 hours a month. Individuals that are caring for dependents and people with disabilities are totally exempt from this. Oregon, by the way, expanded Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act to include individuals earning 138% over the federal poverty level. or of the federal poverty level. Big difference there. And about 641,000 Oregon adults are covered under the expansion. Now, a group called Urban Institute did an analysis, and they projected that the work requirements, if implemented, would result in about 99,000 Oregonians losing Medicaid coverage due to two things. One, non-compliance. In other words, people saying, I ain't going to do it. Or because of, quote, the administrative burden in trying to prove that they do. Like, for instance, every 6 months, they would have to show that they were doing something. Even though if you're collecting unemployment, you have to show you're looking for a job every week. The Oregon Health Department claims that tracking exemptions of the work requirement would be very difficult for them because they only check Medicaid compliance every 2 years. Oh, so you've got to actually step up your game. The bill also includes provisions that would prohibit federal Medicaid dollars, as we said, from not only going to Planned Parenthood, but it would also prohibit federal Medicaid dollars from being used to cover gender-affirming care, hormone therapy, puberty blockers, or sex change surgeries for individuals of all ages. Oregon state law actually requires that the Oregon Health Plan, which is Oregon's version of Medicaid, it's required to cover sex change treatments through the Oregon Health Plan. It's by law. Then you have health benefits that Oregon gives to immigrants and illegals. Now, Oregon has a program called Healthier Oregon that actually provides full Medicaid coverage to about 100,000 immigrants, regardless of their legal status. The bill would penalize states that offer coverage to immigrants without legal status, including those with a green card but don't meet Medicaid eligibility criteria. And what it would do is reduce the federal reimbursement from 90 to 80%. And that would cost the state of Oregon alone about $600 million annually, unless, of course, the state modifies its program, which, of course, you can figure the state won't. That's a look at your crazy news, brought to you by, that guy that I could call if I could just ask about insurance. Yes, it's Sean Sutherland at Ask Insurance. Call him. Ask him a question. I hear he's really good at Trivial Pursuit. All right, there we go. Rick, time for you to roll out the industrial-sized can of real.